Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Let's now wrap up our brief portrait of WikiLeaks and the strange, bloodless, emotionless figure, Julian Assange, the Anne Hamilton Byrne cult administering LSD to children. His stepfather or the mother's second husband, a militant member of this, as suggested by the Wikipedia page. Look at those underground tales if you've got time on your hands. We have a guy called John Young, the founder of Cryptome, who was on the board of WikiLeaks, quit saying that this was a, quote, CIA front, unquote. Take a look at the 3 reports now done by Wayne Madsen on the question of Assange and WikiLeaks. Remember that if you're going to do disinformation, you've got to get your credibility established by actually making some revelations that are real and verifiable and embarrassing and damaging to the agency that you're working for. This is the famous Paolo Sarpi technique, right? To say something good about somebody pretending to say something bad about them. In other words, if we can go through many examples, but it's you're really trying to defend somebody while you're pretending to attack them, right? If I say so-and-so beats his wife when he's really a genocidal mass murderer, then that would be an example. There are many variations. We're now in a sophisticated inside-outside application of that same general principle. Establishing the bona fides with real information, then mixing in disinformation. Case in point, Daniel Schmidt, probably a pseudonym, Assange's German counterpart Confederate, ran a big number against Norm Coleman, Republican reactionary senator from Minnesota, but targeted by Soros because he was blocking the appointment of this guy, Malak Brown, to become head of the World Bank, saying it has to be an American citizen. Traditionally, it has been, right? IMF, European, World Bank, U.S. Norm Coleman tried to defend that. Therefore, the Franken candidacy, right? The Franken candidacy in Minnesota, typical ultra-left candidacy, typical of the MoveOn.org, Open Society Institute of Soros. Sunstein, probably the one of the inspirers of this, along with Morton Halperin, we could look to as a possible supporter of this. Sunstein is now married to Samantha Power. What's her background? This is this foul-mouthed woman who had to quit the Obama campaign in 2008 after she made an obscene attack on Hillary Clinton. You can read all about her in Obama, the Postmodern Coup, and Barack Obama, the Unauthorized Biography. But, of course, she comes from the International Crisis Group. What's the International Crisis Group? Well, it's ideas from Zbigniew Brzezinski, money from George Soros. So there's a direct Soros connection there into the White House. We have Assange showing up in Iceland. This is an interesting story. During 2009, and I was there myself in September, October 2009, I gave a lecture series 5 nights in a row. I was on the main political Sunday interview program, met with some of the top leaders. There was growing momentum for a debt moratorium, a debt freeze, a debt cancellation. This is something Soros actually fears. To throw off the yoke of finance capital and assert that human values are more important than the dead hand of debt, in this case extortion, because there really was no debt. It was simply the British and Dutch governments telling the Icelanders, say, hey, you owe us $8 billion to $9 billion. Based on what? Simply an act of force. Assange, I was there up until about the first week, 10 days in October. Assange showed up soon after and began pushing this idea that Iceland really shouldn't pay attention to debt moratorium. They should pay attention to this question of becoming a world haven for computer hackers, for websites, for pornographers, for controversial things that other governments might try to suppress. It could become, you could imagine, a base for computer operations into China and such places. And this essentially caught up a lot of people that had been interested in the idea of debt moratorium and actual reforms that would do something to save the country, and taking them off into this diversionary track where eventually they end up working for a Soros operation, even though in many cases with the best of motives. This is a good example. You can't come in there and say, no, pay the debt. That won't get you too far. But if you come in and say, hey, look, I have this wonderful, radical, left-wing, anti-authoritarian thing that allows us to attack all of these oppressive people around the world, well then, that will get you somewhere. And that seems to be what Assange has been doing. So, a picaresque operative. If Theodore Shackley was the blonde ghost, maybe here we have the blonde zombie, or is he a blonde ghost? If 9/11 truth annoys him, well, then you can imagine that he annoys us at the present time. Also very interesting, and we should get into this, is Assange says, I'm the new Pentagon Papers, I'm the new Daniel Ellsberg, in so many words. Ellsberg welcomes Assange, saying, yes, he is the new Ellsberg, he is the new Pentagon Papers. And I would also add, yes, he is, provided you know what the original Pentagon Papers were. The Pentagon Papers were a cynical, inside-outside CIA Rand Corporation operation done in order to partially to bring an end to the Vietnam War, but mainly to make sure that the CIA role in Vietnam was largely expunged and that John F. Kennedy was presented as the villain. That is the content of the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers were put together under Robert McNamara, under the LBJ Defense Department, starting in 1967. By 1970, this project had basically been finished. It was superintended by Morton Halperin, who was then in the Defense Department. Morton Halperin today is one of the main political directors of Soros worldwide activities. Morton Halperin operates here in Washington, D.C., as the chief advisor to the Open Society Institute. This may be the apostolic succession in reality from the original Pentagon Papers to now. Morton Halperin, Leslie Gelb, implicated in this entire thing, later rewarded by becoming president of the Council on Foreign Relations. Paul Warnke, some other operatives, a guy called Russo, who worked with Ellsberg. Now we get Ellsberg. Who was Ellsberg? He was, first of all, a Marine. He was a hawk. He was a warmonger. He was part of Operation Phoenix in Vietnam, which means the CIA program to murder cadre of the Viet Cong. Anybody who could read and write was suspected and murdered. We'll get back to Ellsberg in just a minute on World Crisis Radio.